I didn't mean to run into her that morning. It was early, too early for anyone else in the neighborhood to be awake except the old man walking his dog and the woman I'd always noticed in passing, my friend's mom. I was supposed to just drop my laundry in the machine at the corner laundromat and kill time with a coffee while it spun. Instead, she was there, already sitting by the window with a paperback and a half-finished cappuccino. I froze for a second, hands stuffed in my hoodie pocket, before pretending like I hadn't noticed her. But she looked up. She always did. "Morning," she said, voice soft. Not like a greeting, but more like she was testing if I'd answer. "Morning," I echoed, too quickly. I ordered the same thing I always did, black coffee, no sugar. She remembered, somehow. When the barista handed me the cup, she tilted her head with a tiny smile. "Still the same?" I shrugged. "Hard to break habits, I guess." She laughed under her breath. It wasn't loud, but it stayed with me longer than it should have. We weren't close. I mean, she was just my friend's mom. But she looked different outside of their house. Not done up, not hosting. Just her, with a cardigan pulled close, a strand of hair tucked behind her ear, her thumb holding down a page she wasn't really reading. I sat a few tables away, told myself I'd just scroll through my phone. Instead, I found myself folding the edge of my napkin over and over until it was sharp like an arrow. Every so often I caught myself glancing up, at her hands around the cup, the way she looked out the window like she was listening for something. I thought about sending a text to someone, anyone. I even typed one out. "Up early. Laundry." Then I backspaced it. Who cared? Nobody was waiting for me to say anything. "Do you come here often?" she asked suddenly. I almost dropped my cup. Sometimes. Cheaper coffee than the other place." She nodded like she already knew. "I see you around more lately. Your class is done." "Yeah. For now." Silence stretched. Not uncomfortable, but not easy either. She shifted in her seat, then gestured with her chin toward the rain starting up outside. "Should have brought an umbrella." "I never do," I admitted. That made her smile again, quick, hidden. I don't remember what else we said, just the pauses between it. Just the quiet way she looked at me, like she wanted to ask something but thought better of it. When I finally gathered my laundry and headed out, the rain was heavier. She was right behind me at the door. For a moment, it felt like we might step into it together. But she hesitated, holding her bag tighter. I said, "See you," and she touched my arm lightly, barely there. "This stays between us," she said. Just that. Then she walked the other way, leaving me standing there with damp clothes and a coffee gone cold. I kept replaying it in my head all day, wondering what exactly this was. The coffee? The quiet? The way her hand had lingered, even for a second? Whatever she meant, it left me wide awake that night, staring at my phone, half hoping for a message I knew wouldn't come. Still, I couldn't stop listening for it. The sound of her voice, low and certain, saying words I shouldn't remember but do. This stays between us, as I didn't think I'd see her again so soon. But a week later, it was her porch light I noticed first, warm in the dusk, like it was waiting. I was dropping by to return a borrowed drill to her son, but he wasn't home. She opened the door instead, hair tied loosely, sleeves rolled past her elbows. For a moment, she looked surprised. Then her expression softened. "He's out," she said, leaning on the frame. "You can leave it inside, if you want." I hesitated. She stepped aside. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something simmering on the stove. I set the drill on the counter, unsure where to look. She poured water into a kettle and asked if I wanted tea. "I don't usually," I admitted. "Try it once," she said. "I won't tell." I smiled in spite of myself. We sat at the kitchen table, mismatched mugs between us. Rain tapped the window, soft and steady. I told myself it was nothing. Just tea, just my friend's mom being polite. But her gaze lingered a second too long, and my chest felt unsteady. She stirred her tea without sipping it. "You ever get the sense people only see you one way? Like they've decided who you are, and that's it?" Her voice was low, more to herself than me. "Yeah," I said, almost too quickly. "All the time." She looked at me like she didn't expect that answer. Her lips parted, then closed again. I wanted her to go on, but she pressed the spoon against the rim and let it rest. I thought about saying something dumb, like how people saw me as the kid with no direction, the one still figuring it out. But the words stayed stuck. Instead, I noticed how she tapped her fingers lightly on the mug, a restless rhythm. Like she could see every quiet night I'd wasted scrolling through my phone. Every time I wished someone would notice me without me having to ask. And maybe she did. I don't know how long we sat there, but when I finally stood to leave, she rose too. At the door, I fumbled for something to say. "Thanks for the tea." She reached out, brushing a crease from my sleeve. The gesture was so small, but it stilled me completely. Her fingers lingered just a fraction longer than they needed to. "You should come by again," she said, her tone almost casual. Almost. I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. "Yeah, I'd like that." When I stepped out into the damp night, the air felt heavier, like it carried something I wasn't supposed to name. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Not the way friends did, or classmates, or anyone else, but in a way that was sharper, quieter, and far more dangerous. My friend's mom said, "This stays between us." And I'll never forget it. It became a routine, almost by accident. A few evenings a week, I'd pass by her porch after class, and sometimes the light would be on. Sometimes she'd wave me in. Not always. Just enough to keep me guessing. That night, it was different. She was at the sink, sleeves rolled again, washing dishes slowly, like her mind was elsewhere. She didn't turn when I stepped into the kitchen. "You're late," she said, though I hadn't promised to come at all. I laughed quietly, unsure. "Traffic." She nodded, still rinsing a glass. Water ran too long, overflowing the rim before she set it aside. The silence pressed in. Usually she filled it with small talk. Weather, groceries, the dog barking next door. Not tonight. I leaned against the counter. My hands found the hem of my hoodie, twisting it. "You okay?" She turned then, drying her hands slowly on a towel. Her eyes found mine, sharp, searching. "I don't know what this is." The words landed between us like something fragile that could crack either way. I opened my mouth, closed it again. Before I could try, footsteps pounded upstairs. Her son's voice called out something muffled. My chest tightened. Of course he was home. She moved quickly, brushing past me, her perfume faint and clean. "You should go," she whispered, almost too soft to catch. I froze. She was close enough that if I reached out, just once, but the sound of the upstairs door slamming cut through the thought. I backed away. My chair scraped the floor too loud. "Yeah, right. I should." She followed me to the door, her hand gripping the frame like she had to hold herself steady. It can't," she stopped. Her throat worked around the words. I waited. Nothing more came. Outside, the air was cool, carrying that faint metallic smell before rain. I almost left, but something in me, stubborn, reckless, turned back. She was still there, half hidden by the doorway, watching. I stepped closer, lowered my voice. I wasn't planning this. Any of it. Her lips parted like she might answer. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder toward the stairs, then back to me. Her hand lifted, just slightly, like she might touch my arm again, the way she had before. But it stopped midair, trembling, then fell. I think that hurt more than if she'd pushed me away. For a long second, neither of us moved. The night seemed to hold its breath with us. If I'd leaned in just a little, if she hadn't stepped back at that exact moment, maybe something irreversible would have happened. Instead, she drew in a sharp breath, closed the door softly, and left me standing there with everything unsaid. I walked home restless, my head replaying the way her voice had cracked. "I don't know what this is." Neither did I, but I knew it was the first thing in a long time that felt like it could break me. It was a Sunday afternoon. The kind where the streets were too quiet, the air too heavy for no reason. I ran into her outside the park. Not planned, not even likely. She was carrying a grocery bag, and the strap slipped, so I offered to walk with her. We ended up on a bench instead, the bag between us, a loaf of bread poking out the top. You always show up at the right time, she said, almost smiling. Guess I'm lucky, I answered, though my chest was tight. We sat there, not touching, but the space felt thinner than usual. Kids shouted in the distance. A basketball thudded on pavement. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers curled like she was holding back from fidgeting. After a while, she sighed. You know what bothers me? I glanced at her, waiting. That you look at me like I'm someone else. Not just who I am. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry. How do you know how I look at you? Her eyes flicked to me, quick, then away. Because I used to look at someone like that, too. The words hit sharper than I expected. I laughed softly, though it wasn't funny. And how'd that end? She gave the smallest shrug. I got older. He didn't. Something inside me shifted. I wanted to tell her I didn't care. That I saw her exactly as she was. Messy, tired, brilliant, undone. But I couldn't. Instead, I picked at a loose thread on my sleeve. I don't know why, but I keep thinking about you. More than I should. Her breath caught, audible, like I'd stepped over a line. You can't say things like that, she whispered. I didn't plan to, I said. I stopped. Words dried up. The silence pressed harder. She folded her arms, then unfolded them again. You're too young. You don't know what you're doing. I know I'm here, I said quietly. Her face turned toward me, and I swear for a moment she let something fall away. Some wall, some practiced restraint. Do you realize what this would mean? She asked, her voice barely steady. Yeah, I said, though maybe I didn't. I think I do. Her lips parted. No sound came. She rubbed her temple with her thumb, a nervous gesture I hadn't seen before. Sometimes, she admitted finally, I wonder if you see me because no one else does. And if that's true, then maybe I'm using you. And I can't. Her voice broke. I wanted to reach for her hand. I didn't. Instead, I whispered, that's not it. I see you because I can't not. She looked at me then, really looked, and it felt like the air around us shifted. Like the world had gone too still, waiting. I leaned back, afraid of my own body, afraid of what would happen if I leaned forward instead. She must have felt it too. Her shoulders stiffened, then softened, as if she'd let go of some invisible rope she'd been pulling. I don't want to ruin you, she said. You won't, I answered, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Her grocery bag tilted, an apple rolling onto the ground. She bent to grab it, and for a second her hair brushed my arm. My pulse jumped so hard I thought she'd hear it. When she straightened, she held the apple in her palm like it was fragile, almost laughing at herself. But her eyes stayed locked on mine. Something trembled between us, alive and impossible. If I'd leaned in just an inch, if she hadn't tightened her grip on the bag like it was an anchor, maybe everything would have broken open right there. Instead, she asked, almost in a whisper, what do you really want from me? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, because I knew too well. And that silence was louder than anything I could have said. White heavy checkmark prompt 6. The climax. Emotional resolution. 700 words. Writing prompt. Deliver the emotional climax. Not loud, but powerful. Instructions. A choice must be made. To speak or stay silent. To risk or retreat. Let the moment happen in an intimate setting. Kitchen, doorstep, park bench. Show the emotional cost of vulnerability. The tension is in what might be lost. Allow characters to finally say what they've been suppressing, but still keep it quiet. End with a simple, human connection. A smile, a touch, or soft okay. Tone reminder, avoid romantic cliches. The power is in what's real, not what's poetic. That IT was raining again when I finally saw her. Weeks had passed since the grocery store. Weeks of silence I tried not to count. I was heading home, hoodie pulled up, when her voice called my name. I almost didn't believe it. She was standing on her porch, umbrella dangling uselessly at her side, like she'd stepped out too quickly to remember it had a purpose. Come in, she said, not waiting for me to agree. Inside, the house was warmer than I remembered. A faint smell of baked bread clung to the air. She set the umbrella aside, brushing her damp hair from her face. Neither of us spoke for a while. The quiet ticked louder than the kitchen clock. Finally, she gestured at the table. Tea. I nodded. We sat across from each other, mugs between us, steam curling upward. She cradled hers, but didn't sip. Her hands shook slightly. I shouldn't have disappeared, she said at last. You don't owe me anything, I answered. My voice was steady, but my chest wasn't. That's not true, she said, sharper than I expected. She paused, exhaled, softened. I pulled back because I was scared. Not of you. Of me. Of what this says about me. I stared at the wood grain of the table, tracing it with my eyes. My throat tightened. You don't have to explain. I do. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. You're young. You could leave tomorrow and not look back. And she stopped, pressed her lips together. I don't have the luxury of being reckless anymore. I wanted to tell her she wasn't reckless. That every second with her felt more deliberate than anything else in my life. But the words caught. Instead, I said, I thought I did something wrong. Her face softened instantly. She shook her head, a small, almost desperate movement. No. God, no. I looked up then, meeting her eyes. Because I kept waiting. For you. For a sign. Anything. She swallowed hard. The silence stretched until I thought it might snap. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, I missed you too. The words hung there, fragile and undeniable. Neither of us moved. I watched the way her fingers tightened around the mug, as if letting go of it meant admitting something bigger. My hand twitched on the table, an inch closer to hers, then froze. She noticed. Of course she did. Her gaze flicked down, then back to me. This is dangerous, she murmured. I know. And unfair. I know that too. We sat there, both knowing we were balanced on the edge of something that could break us. Her hand finally left the mug. Slowly, deliberately, it moved across the table until it rested near mine. Not touching, just near. The space between our fingers was a breath, a heartbeat. I don't want to regret this, she said. My voice cracked when I answered. Then don't. For a moment, I thought we'd crossed that line, the one we'd circled for weeks. Her hand tilted closer, my pulse roaring in my ears. But instead, she let her fingertips brush mine. Barely there. Enough to feel the warmth. Enough to know. It was nothing. It was everything. We stayed like that, breathing in the same small silence. Finally, she gave a faint, tired smile. Okay. Not a promise. Not a plan. Just okay. And somehow, that was enough to hold me together. Time didn't rush us. It stretched. Weeks folded into months. Not dramatic, just steady. I stopped walking by her house with my chest in knots, wondering if the porch light would be on. It was on more often than not. And when it wasn't, I didn't panic. I understood now. She had her life, I had mine. But somehow, slowly, they began to overlap without either of us forcing it. We found small ways. A loaf of bread on her counter when I came by. My jacket on her chair. She'd make tea without asking. I still took my coffee black, but every now and then, I sipped from her mug just to see if I could like it. I never really did. She'd laugh when I winced, the kind of laugh that shook her shoulders, unguarded, like the first one I'd heard in that laundromat. The park bench became ours again. Not every day, not every week, just enough. Sometimes we sat in silence, watching kids play, letting the air do the talking. Other times she'd tell me about her day at work, or I'd tell her about classes, like we were catching each other up on a story that had no beginning and didn't need an ending. She never said the word love. Neither did I, but there were other ways. One morning, I glanced at my phone as I left class. 8:47 a.m. She'd just sent me a picture of her half-drunk tea with the words, "Too cold now. Should have shared it with you." I smiled like an idiot in the middle of the hallway. That became our language. Little things. Never big. Her son noticed I was around more. I don't know what he thought of it. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But if he did, he didn't say. And she never explained. Not to him. Not to anyone. That was part of it. The privacy we carried like a quiet vow. One evening, I was helping her fix a drawer in the kitchen. The screw kept slipping, and she was standing close, holding the flashlight at the wrong angle. I was frustrated, muttering under my breath, and she laughed, nudging my arm with her shoulder. When the drawer finally slid into place, she said, almost offhand, "We make a good team." I don't know why, but that was the moment I knew we were steady. Not exciting, not fragile, just steady. Later, when I left that night, she walked me to the door. The porch light was on, humming faintly. I turned back, and she was leaning on the frame the way she had the very first time. Only this time, her hand reached for mine without hesitation. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't fireworks. Just a quiet, human weight of her fingers closing over mine. "Okay," she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Okay." And that was it. That was enough. Life didn't become perfect. She still got tired. I still stumbled. We still had days when we didn't quite meet in the middle. But we always found our way back to the table, the bench, the porch. Always found a way to sit in the same silence and let it mean something. Looking back, it wasn't the words she said that stayed with me. It wasn't even the first touch or the first almost confession. It was the small things. The folded napkin, the apple rolling to the floor. The way 8:47 a.m. could mean more than any poem. Those were ours, and they still are.